they were seen as a dominant civ, courtesy of someone that Mr. pointed out, because you could see where the trade posts were going to be, and thus you could get the majority of the sheep. But we'll have to see if that's the case, because last time I checked, some changes were made to Frisian Marshes as we get ready for the first game, the first series, Call to Arms.
Frisian Marshes, long time no see. It's one of the more intriguing maps to look at when you look at the map pool. Always brings in something special, something unique. But it's also a map where momentum really comes into play. Speaking of momentum, DeMu having a great start collecting all the sheep.
Oh yeah, absolutely, just hitting up a storm there, right? And that's impressive because something you have to keep in mind that can sometimes be a little bit of an issue because of the way the map spawns is Dumu is playing the Mongol here. GiveUAnxiety is on the French. GiveUAnxiety at the immediate start has better information because he can see those neutral trade posts, so he knows which way to dart long, or if he wants to cut off in his opponent's base, which way to go as well. But so far, GiveUAnxiety, I mean, he's tried to use this to his advantage to cut across the map, but Dumu has to be happy with the results he's seeing. And you know, playing a civ like the Mongols, especially against the French, you can try to make some sort of aggro play follow-up. Only issue with that is if we check GiveUAnxity's base, as a French player, this is the happiest moment of your life on Frisian Marshes. The safest gold I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, that's a lovely gold to work with. And let's not forget the fact you're kind of guaranteed a forest at the back all the time. So it's not just the gold being secure, it's also that you have a lot of wood to work with. In general, this is a very, very safe base. On the other hand, if there is a single map where safe gold and safe wood is nice but not enough, it's probably Frisian Marshes. You want to secure those spawns as well, and boy oh boy, is he going to miss out on his own sheep. DeMu coming in with the lame, and you know, as good as that gold is, I'm starting to get worried about the food for GiveUAnxiety.
Yeah, and this was the risk that I was worried about that GiveUAnxiety took. He'd done that classic dart across to your opponent's side to be a greedy, cheeky boy. But I think what Dumu done, I wish we could actually have a replay to check that, is at the beginning, I think he might have immediately used the Falcon to check which side was which. And you saw he darted south, gathered the majority, and then because he knows that that's not the way towards his opponent's base, he immediately darts across knowing that French players tend to play for those mid-map sheep ahead of their own. Just a classic issue we've seen time and time again that quite often outright can decide the outcome of these matches.
Oh yeah, look at that villager being pulled now by DeMu, or by, yeah, it's DeMu actually. It's gonna be on the stone. You kind of highlighted the gold, but let's not forget, both of the stones here are on the front for GiveUAnxiety. So if he ever wanted to go for a second TC, it's kind of going to be denied right now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He has to take the stone, right? The gold is just simply not an option. It's a non-starter. It takes too long to get there, especially when you consider the outposts take a minute to construct. But considering how much of the current meta revolves around a second TC, this is definitely going to be crippling for GiveUAnxiety. I'm curious to see what Dumu is going to try to do. Typically, Mongol players tend to hang on one TC and go for a bit of trade. This is definitely the type of map that you can achieve that if you manage to kind of corral those French knights inside their own base.
First Spearman now coming in as well, and you know, that's the kind of nightmare for the French here. You want to go for your knights, but when you're under attack with Spearmen, it's gonna be so problematic to defend. GiveUAnxiety is gonna have to focus heavily on the wood over here so that he can pop out some archers, but you see, he doesn't even have a lumber camp yet.
No, it's a tough one right now, right? Like, he's got no wood to work on. Is he on a straggler tree? He must be at the backside, so he will get what he needs eventually, but part of the issue here is with the slow transition over to wood, you kind of struggle to get into an immediate secondary element to your comp, right? For now, you're just going to be knights, and he does at least have enough to get that first knight out. In the end, he did end up with plenty of sheep, as I would expect. Even when someone gets the edge on this map, it just feels like Adney loved sheep too much to see anyone go without. And we are going to be getting that silver tree as anticipated.
Silver Tree now coming in. You see, this is one of those maps where you do have that neutral trade post in the corner. So that trade route is going to be very long. And as long as DeMu is the aggressor over here, GiveUAnxiety may not be able to spare the troops to harass that trade with. Or, well, of course, DeMu doesn't necessarily have to trade, but the option is going to be there.
Yeah, I think he maybe tries to do it on a bit of a delay. The risk you run is that your opponent has got knights and he has got them out of the base. Dumu needs a second element to his comp before he feels confident to do this. Like, one of the big issues when you try to trade against the French without clear defenses or walling, which you can't do as the Mongols, is even though you've got all these small tree lines, it's actually still a lot of penetration points along your trade line, right? Great for a Civ that has access to palisades because it's efficient to wall between. Not so great for a Civ that can't build those, though.
Indeed, first archer is now coming in here for GiveUAnxiety. You see, he pulled off all villagers from the gold. This is how concerned he is about the spearmen. He's not even going to pop out more than one knight. He's just going to focus on the archers to clean this up with.
And I like this. The problem he had is there was no way to hide the fact he was going archers because Dumu was round there early with the Khan. So it wasn't exactly hidden information. And it is kind of an anticipated regular play. This outpost, by the way, is frustrating for many reasons. It's not just the denial on the stone. It's also the positioning allows him to see what GiveUA is up to. We can see GiveUA is going for horsemen. He doesn't get any value of surprise there because it's likely, yeah, as you see, they're coming out the front and immediately being spotted. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, GiveUA might just be making a play into like a few horsemen and then trying to torch down the outpost. It's a bit risky if that's the case. Instead, he's now wrapping around. He will spot out the trade. And of course, Dumu, being a cheeky trader, has already started to kick that off. Oops.
Ooh, scout goes down. That's going to be a big loss. That's the only scout that GiveUA had. And every time you talk about knights, you should not forget about the scouts. They are the tools that you use to acquire targets for those knights.
Yeah, especially considering that the short way to your opponent's base on this map is straight for a stealth forest, right? That's a huge risk to run blind into there. You know your opponent's already running spears, and you want to play a cavalry element to your comp. That's Danger Town Central. And, well, you're seeing exactly what I'm talking about, right? When you try to move out these flanks, sure, it opens up plenty of opportunities, but if you're not paying attention like this, Dumu, brilliant with the micro in, drags the Khan back towards the spears and already ensures that the initial trader should be safe.
All right, just horsemen coming out here from GiveUAnxiety. Now, I guess the silver lining is that one of the things that DeMu didn't really do is move out for a lot of shorefish. So it's not like his eco is skyrocketing right now, and GiveUA does have that 2-villager lead coming from the French. He does have some good eco upgrades as well. He's got wheelbarrow, double broadaxe is coming in. He's also grabbing the mining upgrade. So at this pace, GiveUA will be able to pull ahead when it comes to economy.
There are some other issues to consider here, though, right? Dumu is going to be trading. That makes up for the gap, especially with how strong that can be, especially if he starts to add in 1-2 outposts to speed that up. On top of it, he's got these Keshiks. Because GiveUA went for these horsemen, he doesn't actually have an efficient trader in that same regard. What I'm talking about is this idea of sustain. When you go knights, you eventually get chivalry, right? So you're able to heal them over time. By comparison, Dumu early into Keshiks ensures that when he goes in these fights, he has that regen element as he clashes.
It's a big thing, right? Especially when you consider that chivalry is a pricey tech for feudal age standards. And also, if you want to go for chivalry, that means that you're sacrificing production time on your school of cavalry. So, in many ways, Demu's Keshiks do what the knights will do, just in a lot better fashion at the beginning of feudal age.
It's even more cumbersome than that, right? It's the fact that because he went for all these horsemen beforehand, he's going to go into chivalry later. You know how there's kind of like a I need this many to justify it type situation with those type of texts, right? Like, I'm not going to go into chivalry if I only have 2 knights. So it makes it harder to just reach that clear point where you feel it's valuable. And that can sting you a little here, as he's experiencing the sting of those very long sticks up his backside here.
GiveUA trying to put some pressure on those traders. In the meantime, he's floating a lot of food. In fact, a moment ago, he had 1,200 food. For a moment, I was thinking that he was going to go castle, but that seems so weird of a choice if that's the plan. I don't think it should be the plan.
No, I think part of it is he's kind of like, he's overburdening his eco right now because he's got all this fish coming in, right? So it's inflating the number. That might now inform a choice to go Castle Age, simply because the fishing is just such a dominant increase in gathering rate, right? So he's not too far off. He's about a minute away. The question is, like, what is the price going to be? I'm seeing an army that's bigger for Dumu, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. More Keshiks are hitting the field, which is countering out the archers. The amount of spearmen is making it very difficult to get in on these traders. And the moment you see that tech up come out, you have to question, does GiveUA have a quick transition that would be able to deal with what would probably be a bulk force of 40 or 45 by the time he's teching up?
Absolutely not. I feel like you rush Castle Age here, but what do? Are you going to go Arbaletrie? It takes some time to build those numbers up. Are you just going to grab the knight upgrades? You have 4 knights on the field only, right? There isn't really a clear power spike that DeMu could get from getting, or that GiveUA actually could get from getting into Castle Age. And as you said, DeMu right now is outnumbering him 3-1 when it comes to the army. I feel like going into Castle Age here would be kind of detrimental for GiveUA.
Yeah, I think like you just saw it there. He had to double down on more knights because he loses those 2. If he had made this clean, like if he had found a way to outplay DeMu on the micro where he doesn't lose a single knight but causes this attention, I think it's a great play. But now if he makes this choice, I actually think that DeMu could potentially roll him over. One big issue I am seeing is you saw on that fishing how quickly they're exhausting the initial pond. That's going to dry up. So if that dries up, by the time you have a tech up, you've maybe got like 400 more food you get out of this, maximum. In fact, it's not even going to be that. So now you'd have to move further out your base without an ample army to defend. Tech up's going to kill you here, 100%.
Yeah, and we're talking about a long distance to cover with these villas. You see, the second nearest pond is so far away. And GiveUA didn't have access to stone. It's not like he could just drop a second TC on these fish at any time in this game. And that's part of the reason why losing access to that stone is so painful for him. And now you see he's actually lacking gold. It looks like he wants to go Castle Age, but this progress is so slow.
Yeah. So the one choice he has here is he could wall this small area as an enclosure and get the fishing plus the deer and then smuggle attack up. But, you know, I think the writing on the wall is already there for that type of play. Really, his only choice now is to all in on a mass of knights and maybe try to find some eco damage to slow down their scaling. Because I think if that Keshik number matches, DeMu can drag the fights out in an uncomfortable way for GiveUA while the trade continues behind it that just gets him further ahead.
Yeah, and once you have that trade set up, you can still move out for the pawns, and you will have a crazy gold income combined with a crazy food income. And the key thing in there is that if you are committing to protecting the trade, you're also kind of protecting the pawns already. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 package, and that could just boost DeMu's eco all the way to the skies.
The package is definitely looking better, not for the Frenchman here. Yeah, the up to 10 traders at this point. I mean, you get to a stage where actually it starts to look more feasible for Dumu to tech up over GiveUA. If that happens, that Keshik upgrade comes through, your knights are heavily discounted even on a 1-on-1. And speaking of heavily discounted, this is the effect of no scouts again. GiveUA only has 1 scout on the field, and it's never available to raid with these knights.
He's trying his best to do some damage to the trade, but you can see him kind of giving up on this at this point. He's got 14 knights, and only 2 of them are skirmishing around this area. The rest of them are held back. Kind of makes me feel like he just wants to keep them alive, get to Castle Age, get Royal Bloodlines, but that's something that DeMu's going to know as well. If he sees a Castle Age from GiveUA here, he's going to know that he needs to fight this army before the key upgrades come in Castle.
You know what I actually think we're seeing here is GiveUA waiting for Dumu to try and tech up. I think that's what he's identified as his only way to win this now, is to force that type of situation. But finally, he's going to ride out, pinch a few Keshiks. Finally, some value is obtained here. And the villagers out in Danger Town here, rushing up an outpost, but there's plenty more than 5 in this area. It's going to force Dumu to fight. GiveUA says he wants no part.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, actually. French can stay in Feudal Age for long, we know that. So, as you said, he's massing knights, he's massing archers, and he might indeed be waiting for DeMu to tech up. Tricky thing is that DeMu has no desire to go up right now. He's more than happy just booming away with the fish, with the trade. Looks like we will have a clash coming up, though. Numbers are looking a lot better here for DeMu.
Nah, and that was a nice little play by Dumu. He steers around the southern side, he forces them on the north, and now they're forced to the clash. It's just not one GiveUA is willing to take. Those spearmen always nibbling from behind, and the archer count for GiveUA is not impressive. And the moment he retreats like this, he keeps exposing the underbelly of his defense. Archers try to pull back once more. Keshiks are maintaining. And remember, every time they just tap you over their head, they're actually winning out in more ways than one. Your health decreases and theirs goes up. And with a lack of archers to hold, I think GiveUA has no choice but to give flight. Or he could throw away the entire army. That's also an option.
Oh, my lord. It feels like he didn't want to just lose the archers there, so he decided to turn around and fight with the knights. But boy, oh boy, was that a bad choice. Archers just died before this battle even began, so the spearmen just massacred all the knights. Now we're talking about a gigantic army lead for DeMu. He can do pretty much whatever he wants in this game at this point.
I mean, I thought that was just going to be a GG by GiveUA. He felt forced to defend there because one of the big issues is GUA, after he fights around that stone outcropping, his retreat pattern is taking him west. That's taking him towards his deer and fish extension. If that ever gets spotted, it's already GG. But I think we're still heading there. I mean, just look at the military disadvantage that he's at here. I'm surprised he hasn't waved the white flag yet. I guess he just doesn't want to roleplay World War II history, but I think Dumu's going to force his hand on this one.
Oh boy, yeah. At this point, DeMu knows fully well that he's got momentum. He can hit the gold mine, he can hit the pawns. In fact, DeMu didn't even find the fishermen to the left just yet. Once he finds those, and I think he will in a brief moment, it's all over for GUA. He's trying to rebuild his numbers, but you see, he's kind of bottlenecked on production. 5 knights and 9 archers in queue, with only a handful of production buildings.
Yeah, I mean, this was just so clean for DeMu. He understands this opening really well, right? We know trade can be quite strong at the moment, especially for the Mongols in particular, and he really played it close to perfection in this one, I think. You know, he leveraged the short-sightedness of the raids from GUA after that early scout loss, and I think that was actually a big detail. The quick reactions of DeMu to get rid of the first scout so early on meant that GUA's early raids didn't feel as impactful because he simply didn't know where the traders were at in the process. And, well, from there, things began to snowball, right? You can't really discount DeMu at any stage in this one. There's small details about how he played around tree lines as well as around stone outcroppings to bait weird fights. And you know what I think really was the final nail in the coffin and why GUA just took that bad engagement? It's the Keshiks. This unit is so frustrating when it's nibbling at your heels because not only are you losing more health and more units, you're actually allowing the unit to heal itself back up. It's the most tilting thing right now in feudal engagements.
And there's a big difference between those knights and the Keshik. The Keshik do get healed as they fight, compared to the knights that need that cooldown period after a fight. So in those engagements, GUA never got his heal, even if he had Chivalry. I'm not even sure if he got that, but even if he did, as the villagers are going to get very uncomfortable here in a brief moment, even if he had the heals, those weren't active in the middle of the fight, while it was for the Keshiks.
I'll give it a GUA. He managed to get a second army seemingly out of nowhere. It was hard fought for, but you can't help but feel he's exhausting the last of what is safe resources. In fact, if he fails to win this fight here, with Dumu now knowing where the villagers are, I don't think they'll escape. So it's do or die. And they're going to clash in the middle of the Stealth Forest, something that you think would actually benefit Dumu. And it feels like it is right now. The Knights are actually just wobbling on top of each other. They can't get the squishy backline. And once these Knights fall once more, Dumu is just going to plow through.
Yeah, in this fight, we don't have a lot of spears for DeMu, though. Those aren't really in here, only a handful of them available. So this fight is actually a lot better for GUA than it should have been. Still, it's just going to be far too insufficient. This is now a war of attrition, and that is something that DeMu is winning by a massive margin. The eco is just so much better right now for the Mongols player.
Lidakor, look at the midfield. I was about to say that this is the thing. If you look at the mini map, that's the real story. Yeah, this is an even trade. What's about to happen next? Not so much. And all benefited by the real trade happening on the backside that has allowed him to inflate a second army so quickly. And, well, these pawns now being shut down and the berries already being exhausted at home, what's your remaining choice? A farm transition? I'd just take game 2 at that stage.
Yeah, I think GUA will do the exact same here. He's just losing villagers left and right. Lost 15 in this game, and he was on 1 TC throughout this entire game. Villager losses are things that he can barely afford, and there it is. He's going to tap out. DeMu moves on to 1-0.
Yeah, and I stand by what I said. This was incredibly clean. You know, bar 1 or 2 small missteps, minor missteps, nothing was really done wrong. On a big scale, big picture scheme, DeMu really did execute magnificently in this game. You know, he understood the tempo requirement. He didn't try to get too greedy with the outpost shutdown, which could have backfired early on. He understood the importance of that scout snipe in the very early game, and then he just focused on hunkering down around his trade in a beneficial way because of the lack of vision for GUA. And you couldn't help but feel the pressure for GUA. You know, French is usually a civ that loves to play pocket economies, but ever since they added the Keshiks into the Mongols' arsenal, they've started to prove themselves just as much of a mid-map threat as the French when you get into that long feudal.
Absolutely. Those heavily armored units in feudal age are just so difficult to fight off. We have seen that with the French for years now. We've seen that with the Rus in a way, and now, of course, you have the Mongols here as well. It's a slightly different unit than the Knights. It's a lot more fragile. But as you said, that ability to heal back is something that makes this unit so versatile. and it just plays into the hands of that Mongol unit spam type of an approach.
I think the way to consider this is like for the French, it's the idea of pick raids, right? You know, just pick a unit, move away. Pick a unit, move away. It's that kind of chip raid. Whereas really what the Keshiks give the Mongols is this constant raid that fits their playstyle, their envisionment as a civilization. And that was the critical ingredient here, is that because Dumu is trading, one of the frustrating things when trade starts to kick up for the Mongols is you feel like you can't just chip raid anymore. You have to constantly be throwing bodies at the problem. And that just benefits the way that Dumu played this map and this composition to essentially ensure that any investment GUA made into attempting to shut down the trade cost him twice what it would cost him. Man, that was the fun game, guys. And now we get this. So I haven't missed this. We go to Lipany for an Abbasid mirror. Oh god.
Oh
I mean,
boy.
it has got more interesting. I'll give it that, Lidakor. When we last saw this in competitive play, the deviation away from greed into military wing openings in feudal was causing some very kind of interesting advantages on occasion. But like, there is still a risk that we just have a 4TC Abbasid mirror on our hands.
Oh boy, possibly. Although, one of the things that could be intriguing to look at is possible trade on this map. One of the best ways to deal with this multi-TC approach is just to go for a trade. And on a map like Lipany, where you have a lot of cliffs, it might be easy to protect that trade. So I'm actually curious to see if we're going to see trade wing coming in from either of these players.
Yeah, I think trade. It's that demon that can actually bite you a little bit, right? Like it's been a while since I've regularly watched Abbasid mirrors. I'm not that weird of person that I seek them out like there's no tomorrow. But I think there's a lot of value in going kind of the melee wing opening and then maybe playing like a second TC into Castle Age. From what I remember, when we used to see a lot of Abbasid mirrors, that still felt like in 1v1's one of the better ways to go. Because essentially what usually happens on the other side is you force your opponent to hunker down and play like response into more eco. And then you just come over the top of things like men-at-arms and lancers, which can't be shut down.
All right, and we just have 1.5 minutes left to go. GUA's other home map is going to be Canal. We haven't yet had time to discuss the draft over here. Regions and Dry Arabia are the choices from DeMu. And as you see, the Civilization draft, we had Mongols and Rus banned on GUA's side, and it's Rus and the Malians being taken out from DeMu.
Yeah, not really too surprised by the Rus. I think they remain a fairly strong civ with a lot of flexibility. When it comes to rank play, I think they're fourth most successful in terms of win rate. But whenever we see them in competitive, it feels like they have a lot of kind of credence across a variety of maps. Even more so when we're talking about water maps being in rotation. Of course, that didn't get drafted this time around, but I believe we have a few potential water maps that can come out right in the drafting. I believe it's Holy Island, Golden Heights, and Volcanic Island. Although I'd say, you know, Holy Island is really kind of the king of the kings for the Roost type pick.
Indeed, and I'm very hyped to welcome back Holy Island to the map pool. It has been one of my favorites for a long time, you know that. And honestly, I've been missing it so much. So I'm definitely hoping for some Holy Island games today.
Hell yeah. I think what I like is how people start to deviate away from it just being about water, right? I think the Spanish bros come to mind, actually. They're some of my favorite people to watch on there because of that HRE men arms push strat that they really did kind of pioneer and evolve, that caught a lot of people off guard and forced that full wall and enclosure. So definitely has some interesting strategies. But before we even get to that, you know, we're going to have to go to the good old classic Lipany map that goes through many iterations. I believe this is the EGC version of Lipany, right? Which is usually the safe way to go, because I believe still to this day the standard ladder map version has some weird generations that can occur.
Indeed, we jump into game number 2 over here. GiveUA versus DeMu. Don't get confused about the scoreline. This is DeMu leading 1-0 against GiveUA here in this best of 5 in the opening day of Call to Arms. And we will have an Abbasid mirror on our hands over here, KP. DeMu is to the south with blue, and to the north we have GiveUA with red.
And the first thing we've got to really eyeball up is where are the resources allocated around them. I'm already seeing some very interesting developments on each side. You mentioned the possibility of trade. DeMu, I'd say, has maybe a little bit cleaner way defending his trade, the way it passes by his base, and then he just has the long wall, right? So like you can get a short trade and escalate it safely. But GiveUA, for an initial trade point, if he does it immediately from his House of Wisdom, is better off. And one thing I really like about GiveUA's spawn compared to Dumu's is that double deer stack that you could essentially kind of plop down this TC, get trees plus double deer, and it's very defendable. We'll see how much that's going to matter, though, because usually a lot of the time you're kind of prioritizing around berry bushes when you're playing as the Abbasids. And we've already highlighted there's not necessarily going to be just this massing of TCs. In fact, in Abbasid mirrors, sometimes it just comes down to one player aping in on the greed player. And at that stage, you're too deep into TC town to respond.
You know, looking at this map, we have a lot of cliffs. So this is one of the more defendable generations when it comes to Lipany. And that could open up opportunities for some trade, especially because those neutral markets are very close to your starting TC. So that part of the map is easily defendable. If you secure a corner for yourself, it might be reasonable to trade, especially when you look at the GiveUA's map. Not so much for DeMu. The corner that he would need to use for his own market for this is rather open. So
yeah,
I feel like if Gio wants to do something spicy over here and he's anticipating a very town center focused build from DeMu, then he could definitely think about trade for himself.
Yeah, I think both of the long trades are fairly exposed. It's just Dumu's is slightly more. Like the distance between his close tree and his long is a bit wider compared to GiveUA's north corner one. So that could sting him a bit. But initial trade, you know, looks like it could be safer for him compared to GiveUA. The issue, however, is, you know, if one player was going to do it, I would have expected it to be GiveUA considering his House of Wisdom positioning. But in fact, DeMu is the one going for trade first, and look at what GiveUA is doing. As anticipated, looking to punish a greed opening, he sets himself up with a military wing.
Ooh, military wing coming up here as opposed to trade. I'm actually surprised to see DeMu going for a trade over here, because, as we just discussed, I feel like if there is a player with the better map for the trade, it's actually GiveUA. But we've seen that flexibility coming with the military wing. Being able to push with those 2 spears and 2 archers is just so valuable. You can try to hit the opponent's gold mine. You can try to hit the opponent's stone mine. You have just so much leverage, especially against a civilization that doesn't really want to commit to a lot of army early on.
You know, the thing as well is, like, when we see this type of deviation, that's when you can tend to get these quick games. It's not always guaranteed the case, but like the things I'm looking at for a start is, you know, small details like the fact that his House of Wisdom is on the north side of his base as opposed to the west is going to give him a little bit less return on the trade, so you might not see as much bang for buck. And even though it is a short trade route, this opening that you're going to see from GiveUA with the initial military unit spawns, they do have places they can poke and prod at, right? Even if you try to do these cheap short walls with DeMu, there's still a lot of entry points to the right side here, so you'd have to waste a lot of time idling up. You have to remember, he hasn't even started researching wheelbarrow yet, so it's not like he could quickly do that.
Indeed, military wing is just now finishing over here, and you do see the benefit of that right away. 2 spears and 2 archers will spawn as a result, and you can just see the idea here for GiveUAnxiety, parking that scout right by the gold mine of DeMu. That's going to be the primary target, and he has no desire to focus on the eco. He's going to open horsemen, and look at that. With DeMu going for the range, GiveUA might have a legitimate chance of doing significant damage here.
I mean, GiveUA definitely does, because look at what else DeMu is doing. He's setting up long trade already. He sent a villager all the way to the southern corner. He didn't even try to play this safe at first. He's gone full Assassin's Greed. And he might get assassinated for him. So does scout the rotation in, but keep in mind, because DeMu knew the military wing play was coming, he went on the turtle mode, right? He stayed at home with his scout to see where they were going to come in. It means he's completely uninformed about this horseman follow-up that he could easily be countered by.
Yeah, that's a big thing. He's got only 1 scout, and that's held back at home. He's got no idea about what the follow-up is going to be. Villagers will be pushed away from the gold mine, and critically, the spearmen haven't taken a lot of damage from the TC. In this build, it's so crucial that you don't lose either of those units to the town center. If you do, this aggression is just cleaned up. Even a single spearman being lost might be essentially catastrophic for this type of an approach.
Well, the interesting thing as well is because DeMu is going into this Camel Archer, it's a cool idea. I like it, but it's very slow. We've seen people try and do this before, and the issue is that, you know, it takes a long time to spawn them. So it's not going to be the primary element of his comp. It seems he anticipated the Horseman play. Maybe he did actually get eyeballs on it just in time, because he's going for one Camel, and then he's immediately going to follow up with Horseman of his own. We've seen this actually a lot in Abbasid mirrors in the past, where you essentially just provide that one Camel as an aura debuffer to the enemy Horseman, and then both sides would just mass the ponies to fight each other.
Yeah, that Camel is so valuable. As you said, the debuff is a big thing, but also the fact that it's very effective against spearmen. You see, just a handful of arrows coming in from the Camel Archer is enough to clean up the spears.
Oh, DeMu? The Camel, a little bit riskier, actually. He was trying to min-max it. We'll be able to get away in time, so he cleans up most of the army, and that's the military wing value mostly gone. DeMu, still some troops left standing, but the problem is this Camel doesn't have anything to form a front line for him right now, and I don't see any world in which he switches into Spearmen to directly counter out these horsemen.
Ooh, a trader is going to be caught in the crossfire. This is good value here for GiveUAnxiety. Much needed value, that is, because right now, DeMu has the upper hand when it comes to the eco.
That's going to maintain for a little while longer, right? The cool thing, if he can protect this trade side, is because he's going to be getting his gold here, he doesn't have to worry about that cumbersome northern gold spawn for him that he'd need to protect. Meanwhile, other side, I was wondering if we were going to see some kind of sneaky play into a second TC, but instead, GiveUA just continues with the all-in aggression, now adding in a second stable.
Yeah, he's going crazy over here. He's got no desire to trade. He's got no desire to build a second TC. This is all in on the army department. And don't forget, DeMu still has his scout back at home. He's got no idea about the extent of this military buildup just yet.
Yeah, he's going to get paranoid at some point and wonder if there is something else being added in. But the tough part for DeMu is until he can dictate a fight, he can't move out the scout. He knows he's up against mass horsemen. And horsemen, I've said it time and time again, I stand by my words, it really is the S-tier unit of the feudal age. No other unit in the game can chase down and eliminate scouting vision quite like a horseman.
Absolutely. Such a cool unit to deny vision from the opponent with. Camel numbers are increasing for DeMu though. You see, that's the only unit that he is using to accompany the horseman, and this means that he's got some really good mobility here. You look at GiveUA, he's got the horseman, but he needs those archers, he needs those spearmen to support, and you see now the horseman, looks like they might actually catch the scout over here, denying GiveUA from the vision.
And I think GiveUA really just got full clarity of what's happening here. There is going to be a massing of camels, not just for the aura. And this is problematic because GiveUA leaned into Spearman. Not only Spearman, he's also getting the Phalanx tech. And we have to remember, although Camel's Archer's damage against Spears did get nerfed, it still is a substantial buffer. They do get, I believe it's 2 times the damage, right? It used to be 3 times. So while they're not immediately obliterating Spearmen, they're still quite effective at whittling them down. And because you've gone for a full cavalry comp, you can maintain a distance away from your opponent's army.
Indeed. 4 camels might be enough to just one-shot a spearman, but even if it isn't, it's going to very heavily damage it. And the big issue that you have here when it comes to fighting those camel archers is that, as you said, they're super powerful. The way that you kind of prevent this from happening is basically not letting the opponent build up those camel numbers, and we haven't really seen that from GiveUA. Well, I'm not going to say he allowed DeMu to build these up, but DeMu definitely had the window to build these numbers up. And now we're looking at a very mobile army for DeMu, and something that's also very capable of beating what GiveUA has.
Well, the problem for GiveUA is that initial fight they had, DeMu done a great job of min-maxing his initial Camel Archer, right? He just used him as a damage soaker. We often talk about, the resource exchange, and we talk about, the cost of units. Sometimes you just have to think about health as a resource. And that's something that DeMu done great in early engagement. And he's also going to maintain that advantage later on these clashes because he knew what GiveUA had to do. Because he's done a military wing opening, GiveUA's only choice is to follow up with boot camp, which means he's going to be transitioning into infantry. Even in that situation, DeMu still has a big amount of health to work with because he's went for these more expensive cavalry units, a choice that is enabled by the consistent trade occurring behind it.
Yeah, now the trade is very consistent. GiveUA had to pull back, so these traders have been working for quite a while now. You see, eco advantage is actually 10 already for DeMu. Might actually shrink in a brief moment if a couple of traders get caught, but this fight looking so good for DeMu.
Yeah, just a hard commitment in by Dumu. Reluctant to give any ground over. He needs to protect that trade. Spearmen are still existing here, so horsemen are getting scratched down, but that goes both ways. And the front line of GiveUA has already broken. It's only archers on the front side behind this. Heavy losses for him at no real cost to Dumu. He continues to scale that eco advantage, and now he can start to flood out onto the map.
And now look at the difference in the mobility. It's only footmen facing off against very mobile army units over here. This is going to be a cleanup. GiveUA has no chance to pull back. DeMu knows this fully well. He's got the eco lead, and he is going to have a huge army lead now as well. Such a decisive engagement that will just snowball this game out of control.
He has nothing else behind this. He has absolutely nothing else behind this, Lidakor. No eco extension. He's playing pocket ecos away from his base. That's just going to be a GG. 2-0 on the board already. And Dumu, man, he's woken up fresh and ready to play because so far in this series, he's not stepped once out of line.
Yeah, we are seeing a very classic DeMu over here. Clinical, precise, well warmed up. And that's kind of what you expect from him. This is probably the best time for him to play. If you kind of follow DeMu around on Twitch, you know that this is kind of the time that he likes to stream in even. So this is a very comfortable time for him to play, and it shows. It shows that he's well warmed up, and it shows that he came in prepared for this. Just a very clinical type of an approach. And let's not forget, both of these games, he's been heavily supplemented by that functional trade that he built up.
Yes, and there's an interesting difference, though, in Game 1 to Game 2. Game 1 was all about extracting more value, right? When you think about what happened in Game 1, Dumu finished that game with over double the destroyed value to what GiveUA had. This time around, their destroyed value was actually comparative. But what Dumu done instead is he just leveraged that outright eco benefit to the maximum to allow him to just body the fights. I think at any given point in the second half of this game, he had double the value invested in military compared to GiveUA. And another thing, I know he's not playing StarCraft, he's playing OE4 here right now, but once a Terran, always a Terran. Dumu, someone that he does phenomenally well in that final fight that just prevented GiveUA from getting the best of trades, is he played classic Terran and he hugged the walls of the tree line. By doing so, he prevented a surround immediately to allow the Spearmen and Horsemen to share that battlefield. Even though you have got Phalanx on GiveUA's side, I felt like a few of his Spearmen didn't initially get in there. They were just kind of like wobbling up against them and tapping their bros on the shoulder saying, when is it my go? Had they been able to clash immediately in that engagement, I think we might have seen a way in which at least Dumu's army is diminished to a point that GiveUA can reset once more and have one final go. But Dumu wasn't going to allow it.
All right, it's a 2-0 over here. This is, I think, the time where we should kind of talk about the format of this event, something that we haven't yet done. This is not a single elimination event, so GiveUA fans over here, you don't need to be disappointed, even if GiveUA ends up losing over here, which kind of seems like that's going to happen based on the first two games. You never know. Maybe he's going to reverse sweep, but this is a Swiss tournament, which means that there will be plenty of other opportunities for GiveUA to get back into this one. Obviously, it's not an easy first round when you have to face a very sharp DeMu.
No, I mean, you said it yourself. You caught him in prime time, right? It's not time for a nap yet, all right? Papa Dumu is here to play, and he doesn't play fair, that's for sure. And I think we are very likely to be heading towards the 3-0. I think there's one Civ that I feel like Dumu is kind of his most switched on, right? I think he's actually incredibly talented with it. I think Ottomans, for me, for at least the last half a year, has kind of been the Civ that I've looked at, and I've been really impressed by Dumu has evolved as a player with. So GiveUA is going to have to pull something magical out of his hat, and it can't be a rabbit. It's got to be a chainsaw or a shotgun. Well, HRE are sometimes capable of that, but one of the big issues you're going to encounter here is the Ottomans is an effective Civ at aggroing you in the feudal age, right? Whereas, you know, HRE traditionally want to play a bit more greedy, go for maybe a quick tech up and take some quick map control. I'm not sure he's going to get the opportunity to do that. So then we have to question mark, what kind of feudal all-in objective could GiveUA aim for?
Oh, yeah, indeed. It's going to be such a tough thing to deal with. We've seen how oppressive the Ottomans can be when you allow them to build up. And you feel like with the HRE, you don't want to play very aggressive at the beginning. You want to hit that Castle Age timing with the Burgrave maybe, or dare I say just go fast Imperial Pass of Schwabia. But your best time in the game, or your strongest time in the game, is kind of this 15 to 25 minute period. But if you don't really harass the Ottomans until that point, they will just snowball you with a bunch of Sipahi, bunch of archers. We've seen Ottomans nowadays playing 2 TCs, so their eco is also going to be very powerful behind this. I feel like GiveUA needs to play a very off-meta HRE here, because he needs to do some damage on those Ottomans.
Yeah. And that's the problem is, like, if you're trying to be the aggressor here, how are you going to be the aggressor? We know how Ottomans like to open up. You might see them just immediately go into the military school, get 1 or 2 initial spears out. Not the craziest play against the HRE because they have the prelate, of course, but it is annoying for them to deal with usually. Or he just immediately, like, just full-on plows into feudal age. He goes mass archers. What's your counter going to be to that? He could even go into the Sipahi. There's plenty of options on the table, and we're always looking for that critical point where the meta becomes an unlock, right? Another thing to keep in mind in the HRE Ottoman matchup is HRE players, their civ is one of the least likely to go into archers. That's a problem. If you don't go into archers, a play that did become more popular and is incredibly strong in the right hands is the double imam point investment. By getting your hands on that AoE heal, when you're up against an opponent that will not build any range units, you're limited to no risk of ever losing those heal bombs as you push your army forward.
Yup, it looks like countdown is about to finish, folks. It is game number 3 coming up. DeMu with a 2-0 lead over GiveUAnxiety. Let's see if he can finish this with a clean sweep. Obviously, with the settings that we have and with the format we have, it's not just a matter of winning series, it's also a matter of winning games. So let's see if DeMu can keep that clean sheet of his, or whether GiveUA may start mounting a comeback over here. It's HRE versus the Ottomans as we head to Dry Arabia.
GiveUA will take anything he can get here. Game 1 and Game 2, he was given no quarter, no grounds. Well, it might need more than a bribe of a quarter or a few dollars to convince DeMu to give this one up, because this guy is looking on fire right now. As we hop in the third map, Ottomans versus HRE, DeMu in the blue, and on those Ottomans, he's a force to be reckoned with. I actually think he's one of the best players at playing this civ without a doubt in my mind. I'd say like top 3, top 4 Ottomans whenever I watch him. And he is going to be opening up, by the looks of it, with the military school. So we are going to see that initial spearman harass on the table that we talked about. We look across at GiveUA's base. The gold is retracted, but it is exposed. He can access and push the HRE off that resource.
Yeah, that's going to be a long walk there for DeMu actually. But the thing when you look at HRE is that they will always have the prelate to heal the villagers with, so your target here with the Ottomans and the military school is not to kill villagers. It's all about forcing that idle time and forcing that prelate to commit to healing instead of buffing the villagers.
We do have to remember that when you heal, you do inspire now, right? That was a change I think they made a while back. True. So it's like, it's kind of annoying because what you actually have to do is you have to try and get the prelate. But the crazy part is the prelate's buff range, at least, is quite substantial. So coaxing him to come close enough to the gold mine for you to do anything can be problematic. And I'm curious to see, actually, if GiveUA will try to do any kind of like switcheroos where he'll move his sheep to an alternative corner. It's something that was popular amongst the HRE players for quite a while, but some people never really found the true value in it. I do personally think it's actually good value. It's more efficiency. And it looks like he has begun to do exactly that. Check that. He's got the sheep on the west corner here. So he's gradually shifting his economy around to the northern side of his TC because his gold is on that side. And it means the prelate can stand there buffing instead of idling by walking between the two locations.
It's going to be important, right? As you said, when you heal, now you buff as well with the prelate, something that I keep forgetting. But if you have to pull that prelate to the north to heal the gold miners, that means that you won't be buffing your food villagers. So getting the two groups of villagers closer to each other will minimize that downtime of not buffing your food villagers in a way.
Okay, and I think we are seeing what I would expect here. This looks like this is going to be possibly like some sort of 2TC play. Something that has been growing in popularity at the HRE, and I think I like it this game because we already mentioned the difficulties of dealing with the Ottomans in Feudal Age and being forced to fight in Feudal. And the other tick of the box that makes it look good is if you look to the back of GiveUA's base in an easily wallable off area, he has got a great location for a second TC on his deer site.
First Spearman now arriving, finds no one on the gold mine. That's some valuable intel over there for DeMu. He's going to find the Aachen Chapel. And at this point, seeing that Aachen Chapel and seeing how close that deer pack is, I would not be shocked if he just tried to kill the deer to prevent GiveUA from pushing those closer to the Aachen Chapel.
I don't think he's going to push them close to the Aachen Chapel anyway. And this is frustrating, by the way. You see those sheep on the backside? That's problematic. Gave away 2 additional sheep, safe resources he might need. And because the Spearman is here, he's going to have to pull the Prelate with the villagers whenever he goes for a second TC, if he goes for a second one. Because otherwise, that Spearman can body block you for a good extra 20 seconds before you get the foundation down.
Villagers moving out towards the stone mine, and that's something that has been spotted by DeMu. He had the Spearman nearby. He saw it very clearly that the villagers are moving towards stone. And that's a lot of villagers. That's not for just arrow slits on a tower. That is definitely for a town center.
And Ben is so switched on today. Did you see that? The immediate pull away before even the first strike from the villager can come out. So he's not even chipping this Spearman down. Instead, he's the one getting chipped, almost losing a villager in the process. And this is what I mean. Now you have to pull the Prelate out. It's not the end of the world, remember, because the inspiration buff he gives in an AoE, it has a duration. It's not a constant requirement. So you can actually shift the Prelate out. In fact, little tip for people when you go Castle Age and you look to get your first Relic, if you time it right, you can have your Prelate walking to pick up a Relic after you start producing the next Prelate from Regnix, because then you can garrison the new one in the Archon. Small details like that are really what gets you the mile in the HRE. But I am expecting this to be an attempted TC drop on that deer stack. I think it's the only logical place on this map right now for GiveUA.
Yeah, whenever you drop additional town centers, you try to put them on food sources. You will be on 2 TCs, you will be depleting your food rather quickly. So you want to expand towards food, and indeed, that's exactly what GiveUA has on his mind. The key thing here is that DeMu knows about everything here. There is nothing hidden when it comes to the strategies of GiveUA.
And the reason why GiveUA, like, it's not just the deer. The other thing that this does is it makes wraparounds difficult for DeMu. He can't circle the base like a shark in fresh water, right? Like, you're cut off now when you go around the back by this TC placement. But right now, you might be getting cut down. I mean, DeMu is so on point here. The Prelate doesn't even try to save that villager. They're forcing more away. Remember, even if he does still get this up, because these villagers are running around like headless chickens, not only are they not gathering, they're not actually accelerating you towards your win objective of getting this second TC up.
Yeah, it gets worse. When you look at these villagers, they are buffed villagers. So losing out every second of work time with them is even more impactful than it would be for some other civilizations. And let's not underestimate the significance of that. When you look at the HRE, one of the biggest things that you have as a civilization bonus for this civ is this Prelate/Aachen Chapel buff. If you miss out on this, you're losing one of the biggest tools that you have available.
Yeah. And do you want to know what would look like on paper a very simple and uneventful buff that would be phenomenally huge if you really wanted to break HRE? Wheelbarrow as a research in Aachen Chapel. Right? Because that's the thing that you'll see here is GiveUA is so slow moving those villagers away, so slow moving them out, so slow doing anything with them, because as is typical with so many HRE players, he doesn't have a mill. He hasn't got wheelbarrow tech at all, right? So please, Relic, don't add that to the Aachen Chapel, because I do think that tiny things like that would break the game. It's the fact that DeMu identifies these details and knows that he can get away with that extra level of aggression, whereas other civs would have wheelbarrow and would probably make it very difficult for you to even step in with those spin because you'd be at risk of being grabbed each time.
The house is just going to be on the way for DeMu soon.
This is like one of those frustrating situations where you actually wish you built the house while directly walking to the mining camp, right? You know what I mean? So it's like it would have been in range of the TC. Because you don't want to have to like use an E-repairs on a house, right? But you're going to be forced to.
Yeah, range now coming in here for GiveUA. You feel like this is just still a response to those Dark Age Spearmen that came in. He's just 5 steps behind at this point. DeMu's going to be beating him to Castle Age by a massive margin. And with the Sipais coming out, he is going to have that mobility and map control to secure relics. That's going to compensate for the lower amounts of villagers. He unlocks new military schools. You feel like the escalation is just a lot more rapid here from DeMu.
Yeah, and remember, he went for the Imam points, so he's already moving out for those relics. Those relics, by the way, I don't think you could ask for a better situation up against an HRE player. 4 of them are closer to DeMu. Or at least 3 of them, right? The 4th one is really out there in no man's land. And the other problem is GiveUA was slow into the horseman. He went archers first, so he doesn't really have that mid-map control and position. And as you already identified, with Sipahi being passively generated and the increased production rate that comes with that Castle Age arrival, it's going to be difficult for GiveUA to actually match the count of horsemen coming out from his opponent.
Yeah, armory is the landmark of choice here for DeMu, so no surprise on that front. Question is how many military schools he has right now. You feel like he kind of rushed Castle Age here.
1? Yeah, 1.
Yeah, it's just 1 military school right now, but he's got double stables. He wants to
He doesn't
finish
even
this
have a
game
blacksmith
quickly.
yet. Yeah, so this will be the tech up into the blacksmith drop, and then you see him flood out from there. He's already got the imams in position, so that'll be the 1-2 pick up. He didn't go for the western one first, right? He didn't feel like that was the risk worth taking because he didn't have vision on that side of the map, and it's a good choice as well because that's exactly where GiveUA went hunting with the horsemen.
Yeah, GiveUA's got 2 horsemen out there. It's only 1 Sipahi right now from DeMu, but once he's got the Lancers out, it's going to be so difficult for GiveUA to do anything. He's got an 8 villagers lead, which is nice and neat, but once the Lancers start coming out, those villagers will be so much exposed. And don't forget, that gold mine is completely undefended back at home for GiveUA, so that's going to be prime hunting ground for those Lancers. 2 relics already on the way back home for DeMu.
I see another huge issue with GiveUA. This has always been the issue with the HRE. Everyone looks at that 40% gathering speed buff, and they're like, HRE broken, really strong. Well, no, because one of the big weaknesses is players tend to be greedy, and with that greed, it means that you have to somehow find additional resources. Because if you're gathering something 40% faster, it's depleting 40% faster, right? So where I'm looking is the deer, the fact that he didn't get many sheep at the beginning of the game compared to Dumu. I'm a little bit worried that GiveUA is going to run out of gas before he can get a full feudal push even going.
Yeah, that's a scary detail, right? He's going to run out of resources just when those Lancers arrive, and then there's just no backup. The second hunt he has is miles away to the north.
I love that Imam running after the other one. Like, come back, you idiot. I'm trying to heal you. He's banging him into a bad fight here, though. GiveUA, he goes in. He does at least get the Imam, but immediately loses 2 horsemen. Now baits all these archers out in the mid-map that Dumu is going to be able to clean up. This is way too many knights to deal with. And GiveUA, it looks like his Spearman battalion are nowhere nearby to help.
Yeah, they're just nowhere to be found over here. Even if they were, they're facing Castle Age units at this point. And you see all these archers are getting cleaned up. It's decent value for DeMu. Sure enough, he lost the 2 imams, but let's not forget, he has gotten 2 relics already.
Exactly, so he can afford it, right? Passive reduction, extra passive gold. I mean, you just face palm into this, like you just full face smash into these spearmen. These are Castle Age Knights versus feudal Age spearmen. This is an absolutely fine trade to get because behind this, Dumu can send out more imams, hoover up the remaining relics. He's already got a 3rd one coming back home. He'll be onto the 4th soon enough. And I mean, with this type of map control he's now escalating to, I actually think we're looking at a 5-relic game in which the HRE has none of those relics.
Oh boy, that would be just so detrimental to GiveUA. It basically means that he has to go for a Burgrave Palace. There is absolutely no point for the Ragnitz Cathedral at that point. At least he's got the Spearman, at least he's got the Horsemen for now. DeMu doesn't really have an answer to those just yet, but at this point, we have the 3rd relic coming in for DeMu. He's more than satisfied with this position, and he's just now started to build up those military schools. He still has the armory working for him, so that real powerhouse of the Ottomans is about to show.
Oh man, there's the read. Perfect read by GiveUA. He starts to get the wall up on the west side of his base as the wraparound from the Knights comes in, but these Knights are split off. Dumu, he understands perfectly well. Like I said, it's HRE. You exploit your resources 40% faster, and that's why you're already seeing a retreat out of the base to the north to gather more deer. You're already seeing the tree line start to exhaust a bit. And meanwhile at home, because he's got these relics, he can essentially hold what is mostly a melee army of GiveUA's hostage if they ever try to dive. And speaking of dive, the wall! GiveUA was greedy. He only sent 2 villagers out to build it up. And that is a catastrophe. Nothing to defend here. A mass excursion away from the base from the villagers of GiveUA. He needs to get everyone out of dodge.
Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of casualties. So much idle time as well. And all the villager lead that GiveUA had basically evaporated. Those walls just a little too late. There might be a chance for retaliation over here. There has to be some villagers pulled back by DeMu. And in fact, a couple of villagers on the stone mine are getting picked apart, but now Janissaries are making an appearance. Relics are still there. You feel like GiveUA is in such a bad position right now, still being stuck in feudal.
Like, it's going to get worse. Dumu pulls that Mangonel, who's going to hold him hostage. He's just waiting for a few troops to hold a choke point. Meanwhile, looks like the life is being choked out of GUA's economy. Luckily for him, the deed of the north have not been discovered just yet, but everything at home has no hope. Everyone is dying there. Clashing the choke point again. More troops coming out. This one little Janissary has been getting some value, but the archers are finally going to target him out. And repairs are underway on the temple. Great little move from Dumu to maintain that 300 gold a minute tick. And I'm just waiting for that Mangonel to join in, Lidakor. He's on an extended leave, but he's been aggravated now. And I believe that is, yes, 2 Mangonels in play now. If he holds a choke point, even with villagers, GUA could be completely pushed off of this base push.
And it looks like he is going to call off his troops. At the same time, he lost so much back at home. He's down to the same villager count as DeMu is. Wheelbarrow is just now coming in for him. His eco has been broken to pieces.
GUA!
Oh! Nope.
Yo, is it me? Or, I mean, that delete should not have went through. I'm just going to say that. Like, that went blue, okay? He went blue in the face from Yellow Mololo, and that guy turned blue. I want a refund. Mangoes? Goodbye.
Oh, man. It's just hard to find a win condition now for GUA. He is stuck in Feudal Age. As you said, he depleted his resources. He's got a massive pocket eco to the north on the hunt. Expect DeMu to probe that very soon. And now we're seeing some Janissaries appear, some crossbows appear. I'm not even sure why we have crossbows, actually. Makes no sense against just light units only, but still, now it's just a flood of units. You see triple ranges, multiple military scores. This is where DeMu is going to turn on that real powerhouse of the Ottomans. And I just don't see GUA being able to stop this.
And the point to the crossbows, by the way, is it's just a more valuable unit to have than the archers, right? There's no real upside to the archers over it, and it ensures that GUA can't even fall back on the one thing he hasn't built in Feudal Age yet. Not Rams, as much as I know the boy loves them, Men-at-Arms. He can't even rely on Men-at-Arms to recover this game. He's got no clear option anymore. And, you know, how high was he on the eco count at one point, right? I think he was almost 10 ahead. Look at it now. DeMu with 4 relics is now 3 villages ahead of the HRE. The army numbers are even. And GUA, I mean, Tech Up's nowhere inside here.
No, not at all. He has the food income that he needs, but, I mean, that's so fragile. If DeMu ever finds it, it's game over for GUA.
He's pushing him towards it.
Yeah, that's not going to help.
Oh, no. Deep breath, guys, deep breath. That's like watching the Titanic in an alternate universe where it dodges the iceberg. That would have been an absolute catastrophe for him. In fact, I think if that eco pocket got spotted, you might have just seen a GG from GUA at that stage. I mean, you know, he's definitely not getting anything at home, right? The amount of raids that keep coming in, keep idling him up. And you have to remember, you're up against the Ottomans. So not only is it a case of them matching your eco count, they're also getting stuff for free alongside it.
Absolutely. And to be honest, even with DeMu not seeing that source of food, he should know by now. He knows fully well that his opponent has to get food from somewhere. And you see now we have this pocket eco to the south as well on the berries. GUA is just so stretched out.
He saw that one with the court. Like, he even started to click towards it at one stage. So I think DeMu, he just peeled back to the west side. He might now head over to the villages because this frontal force is going to force all of the army from GUA to address it. Meanwhile, back at home, Dumu is being a cheeky git, going for the second TC close. Italian Spearman will shut that down temporarily. But once again, you know, if this many of these troops are here and they're on even military forces, how does GUA now hold?
Yeah, and most of the spears are here, so there's not much that can fight off this cavalry, especially when you have some Janissaries to support as well. Janissaries now from the back line, they will take this fight. And this is where things will get very bad for GUA. Mangonel's arriving, Janissaries round. Oh, beautiful!
That's a stinger. I mean, I think he was going for a quick wall to try and block off reinforcements, but too little too late. And now with the Janny backline and the lack of archers anymore for GUA, because he can't build them due to the Mangonels, like, what do you do here? This is now 3 Mangoes? The army value speaks for itself, folks. We're almost at a triple value for Dumu, and those words off my lips are enough to make GUA shake his head and say goodbye.
DeMu just very clean in this series. Clinical, a classic DeMu that you expect from a tournament. He has come in very sharp over here, and he's just been on top of GUA throughout this set. First 2 rounds, very consistent trade, and even in the third game, without trade, you feel like DeMu didn't rush anything. It was a very slow and methodical game, and he just slowly ground down GiveUAnxiety, slowly building up these win conditions, denying the food, harassing the enemy. Just a very methodical game from DeMu. Secures a 3-0 win here in the first round of Call to Arms.
Yeah, I do think that the Altman pick was really nice against the HRE, and maybe in some ways, they've played before. Maybe it was anticipated it was going to go towards that, but you can't take anything away from Dumu. Like each of these games, for different reasons, each time, he found ways of flexing over his opponent. Micro always played a big part of it, as you'd expect from a former professional StarCraft 2 competitor. But the way he played the map as a whole from map to map was impressive in itself. This one especially, I think the value he got out of those spearmen in the early phase of the game was absolutely incredible. And it was greatly informed by the fact that you're not up against wall barrier, you can't easily get pinched. And as long as you are paying attention at all times, you are coming out ahead there. And he comes out not just ahead in that game, but the whole series in its entirety, 3-0, and a dominant way to open the day.